Good afternoon, everybody, or early evening. This is Nadine Groenig. I am the Tribal Outreach Coordinator for Save Our Schools Arizona and Guatzi in the Mexichietza. I'm also a member of the Laguna Pueblo in New Mexico. I am the former Director of Indian Education for the Arizona Department of Education, where I worked for nearly 18 years. So that's a little bit about me. And I just want to welcome you to today's Indigenous Perspective session. The topic today is the effects of COVID-19 on Indian education. And so I'd like to welcome our panelists, Dr. Robbie Corporich from Holbrook Unified. He's a superintendent of that school district. Dr. Cynthia Clary, the acting superintendent for Salt River Schools, and Ms. Kimberly Dankow-Begay from Amphitheater Public Schools, or Unified, or just Amphitheater Schools. I never know what to call your district. So I'm just going to share with you a little bit of information about each of our panelists and then give them an opportunity to say hello before we start in on our discussion. So I'll start with Dr. Corporich. He's the superintendent of Holbrook Unified School District, like I mentioned, in Holbrook, Arizona. He is in his 29th year in public education with 10 years as a classroom teacher in Kansas and the past 19 years in school and district administration. He is in his 12th year as the superintendent of Holbrook Schools. Robbie, I'm going to be informal because I've known him a long time, currently serves on the Arizona Rural School Boards, School Board, the Arizona School Administrators Legislative Council, Arizona State Board of Education Certification Advisory Committee, West Ed Board, and the Arizona Department of Education Technology Task Force. He is the past president of the Arizona Impact Aid Association. Robbie has been married to his wife, Debbie, for 29 years. They have 3 children, Corey, Kylie, and Kobe. And Robbie enjoys golfing, coaching basketball, and traveling when time avails, although it doesn't sound like he would have much time for that. Dr. Cynthia Clary has worked in the field of education since 1985 and as an administrator since 1998. She earned her doctorate in educational leadership from the University of North Texas, her master's degree in educational administration from the University of North Texas, and her bachelor's degree in English, French, and English as a second language from the University of Texas. Dr. Clary had previously served as assistant superintendent and superintendent in Texas and Montana. In 2012, Dr. Clary was named Northwest Regional Superintendent of the Year by Montana Association of School Superintendents. She serves as assistant superintendent in the Salt River Schools in Scottsdale, Arizona. Part of her work is focused on revitalization of both the O'odham and Peepash languages and their infusion into all curricular areas. Salt River Schools currently has a strong culture and language program at the Early Childhood Education Center and Salt River Elementary School. Salt River is an incredibly unique school system. Cultural awareness and honoring of their community's belief system are incorporated into all that they do. And finally, we have Ms. Kimberly Dankow-Begay, I should say Ms. or Mrs. Kimberly is of the Kiowa, Caddo, and Pawnee Nations, born and raised in Southwest Oklahoma. She received her bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in pre-law from Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. Kimberly also studied at the University of Arizona in the American Indian Studies graduate program. Kimberly's professional experience includes working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Kiowa Tribe of Oklahoma, the United Kiowa Band of Cherokee Indians, and currently as an American Indian Education Coordinator and Advisor for the Amphitheater Public Schools in Tucson. In addition, she serves on the Arizona Office of Indian Education's Indian Education Advisory Council and is the president of the Arizona Indian Education Association. She is also active in her local Native organizations, including the Native Education Alliance of Tucson. She was inspired by her parents and grandfather to continue in their tribal tradition and heritage. This is what she teaches her children. Kimberly has presented on and spoken of her Native culture, Indian federal law and treaties, and cultural storytelling at numerous events. So welcome, everybody. I really appreciate you being here today and sharing some of your wisdom about and experience about what's been happening in the era of COVID-19. It's been a very challenging year for everybody around the world. So I would like to give you each an opportunity just to say hello and maybe share something that I didn't cover in your bios. So Kimberly, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Nadine, for that wonderful introduction. As is custom for our people, I'd like to just introduce myself in my tribal language. So, Kuahat, Nawa, Hatso, Toya, Goigu, Maseb, Chawi, in Oklahoma, Aim Dog, Kimberly Dinkapige, Khan. So, good afternoon, and thank you for having me on this panel discussion. I look forward to this discussion we're going to be having. Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Adiaphik Shuga, Cynthia Clary. My name is Cynthia Clary, and I'm honored and privileged to serve the community of Salt River, Pima, Maricopa. We are so blessed, and I just have to say that we have to acknowledge at every event that we are living and working on lands that have belonged to members of our community since the millennia, and we are very honored, and we need to acknowledge that the land belongs to the people of this community. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. I'm not yet in the habit of doing that, and I need to. So, Robbie, do you mind if I call you Robbie during this?
You bet. Yeah, Nadine and I have known each other for what, 18 plus years. So you can call me whatever you want to. So, hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robbie Corbridge. I'm superintendent with Holbrook Unified School District. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in to have this very important discussion about how we educate our Native American students in the state of Arizona. And thank you to Save Our Schools Arizona for providing this platform for the discussion, and Nadine for moderating and coming up with the questions. And I hope that it's beneficial to our audience to be able to have this important conversation, and just being able to do it in this platform is one of the positive things that have come from this this pandemic this year. So
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Save Our Schools Arizona. Our main mission is to ensure that our public school districts receive the taxpayer funds that they should be receiving, and to keep them from being diverted off into public schools through private schools through private school vouchers. But today, that's not what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about a year of living in a pandemic. So it's been about a year since we all learned about COVID-19, the coronavirus, and it's been quite a year. Hundreds of thousands of American citizens have died. Teachers across the country have struggled to provide their students with a quality education, both online and in person. Many of those students, especially Native American students, have fallen behind. But falling behind for Native students, who as a subgroup are already academically below grade level, and as a subgroup, we're at the bottom academically prior to COVID-19, could have a devastating effect, a lifelong impact on their lives. So today we will discuss the possibility of that impact, and where we can also find hope that this will not be the case for these students. So I'm going to start the questions with Dr. Corbridge or Robbie. Schools across the country have been closing and reopening since the pandemic struck. So how many days have the schools in Holbrook Unified School District been closed in the last year due to COVID?
yeah, thanks for that question. And you know, part of the Native American culture is storytelling, and we've got a story to tell through this pandemic. And you know, the story started last about almost a year. Couple weeks from now will be a year that we entered spring break in the Holbrook Unified School District, and this is very similar to everybody throughout the state. And throughout that week, we were enjoying spring break, and about Wednesday, we started hearing of the COVID outbreaks and the potential for school closures. And by Friday, we were making phone calls to our parents and to our teachers and saying, hey, we're not coming back on Monday. We're gonna have to navigate through this pandemic. We don't know how long we're gonna be closed. At that point, it was a couple weeks, and then that turned into the next month, and pretty soon it was the remainder of the year. And so as we ended last year, really with on-campus learning in March, we didn't return back to school for the remainder of the year in terms of being on campus, brick and mortar instruction. And then we started the school year off. Our intentions were to come up with a blended learning. And we started with, we want a safe environment, we want a healthy environment, we want an educational environment for all of our students and parents. And we talked about how are we going to do that? And part of that was parental choice. It really came down to parents making a choice about what they wanted for their students and their children. So we opened up officially for back on campus. We were virtual all the way up to September 14th. And we started with some online blended learning type things where we were doing A/B days starting September 14th. And so our kids were doing 100% online up to that point. And we got about 20 to 30% of our kids back on campus. One of our schools, Indian Wells Elementary School, which resides on the Navajo Nation, has been closed for in-person learning since last March. So almost an entire year that they have not been back on campus. We've had some on-site services. We have some special education services, but for students coming back onto campus, they have not been back onto our campus since then. And so we had an intermittent closure right before Thanksgiving. So that wave of socialization and what's going to happen right after a time in which people are getting together. We've kind of rode those waves. Right after Christmas, we were able to come back and we were on campus for 3 weeks, and then we had to shut down for about a week. And luckily, we were able to tie those into days off like Martin Luther King Day. And so that rolled into only 3 days off because we switched to a 4-day calendar for this year. That was part of our strategy. It was set when we have kids on campus, let's capture that time, but let's also have a 4-day calendar so that we have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So rolling those 10 days is kind of what we've been working through. Those 10 days off where everybody can kind of recoup and less exposure and so forth. Those have been the only 2 intermittent times that we've had throughout the year. But we did start late, and right now we're reevaluating after spring break to get more kids back on our campus.
Wow. So I kind of, while you're talking, I'm thinking about maybe a football game where the coach has to keep changing the plays according to what the other team is doing. And you kind of have to just decide when to punt and when to go for,
Yeah.
4th and inches or whatever it might be, to use a football analogy. And I would imagine too that the reason that Indian Wells was closed had a lot to do with Navajo Nation and their decisions, because that is your one school that's on a reservation. Maybe not. I don't know, but I know Navajo continues to have a huge impact from COVID-19.
Yeah, we were respectful of the Navajo Nation Department of Education and their legislative action to go virtual. They are still on virtual. They've closed down multiple times on stay-at-home orders and basically shelter-in-place orders where there was very limited travel even on the Navajo Nation. So we've been able to provide some busing services for those students that choose to come on to our campuses at the junior high and the high school. But that school on the reservation, the Navajo Nation Indian Wells Elementary School, because it resides on the Navajo Nation, we have not opened our doors for on-site learning at this point. We meet with the Navajo Nation on a weekly basis. The metrics are looking better and better every week, but there's still a sense of hesitancy, so to speak, because there are casualties on the Navajo Nation. It's impacted families, and there's multi-generational families, and we have kids that are living with their grandparents, and so that's why we come back to this has to be a parental choice. You have to look at the circumstances of your home and say what's the best choice. And we've tried our best to deliver services to the home, but that has also been challenging this year.
Yeah, I would imagine so, because you said you don't know the circumstances of each of the families for the students that you have the obligation to educate.
Yeah.
So Cynthia, Dr. Clary, I know that, of course, all your schools are on Salt River, Pima Maricopa Indian communities. So how did that affect whether your schools are open or not?
Well, as Robbie said, it parallels a lot with what he's experienced with Indian Wells. The situation is the same. We closed when everyone else did in March. Same thing. We'd had the week off for spring break, and then that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is when we were learning that we weren't going to reopen. And so we've been closed since then. We are still, as of today, 100% virtual. It's presented a lot of challenges, but it's also presented a lot of really good opportunities for us to really get information that we didn't have about the technology that's in every home. We surveyed parents before, and we didn't always get accurate information, or the phone's been disconnected, the cell phone. And so it's provided us the opportunity to really get good information about technology needs. And so now we're completely one-to-one. So every student has access to, has a laptop in their home. We also had staff members that didn't have computers in the home, so it's also impacted that. But yeah, we've been completely virtual since almost a year, like Robbie said.
Wow. So I guess that could be one of those those positive things that come out of something negative, is now, because moving forward, COVID or not, or pandemic or not, you are able to continue that distance learning if you need to. And children are able to do their homework and do research projects, and same with the teachers. They're now able to plan better for for what they're going to be doing in the classroom, whether it's virtual or on site.
Right. I'm sorry, Nadine. One of the things that was also a positive was just really looking at the types of professional development that our staff needed. Some of our parents were really quick to say, well, what do you mean that the teachers don't know how to do Microsoft Teams? Not every teacher knew how to do Teams. And so before we had to do a lot of front loading for professional development for our teachers. And so we were able to do most of that beginning in the summer. And again, it's not been fun, obviously, but I mean, I have to say that educators across the state of Arizona are doing an amazing job of really trying to step up and take the initiative to do what's in the best interest of our students.
Yes, of course they are. Good teachers are good teachers, and they'll do whatever it takes to deliver that instruction.
Absolutely.
Under the best circumstances that they can. So I'm gonna ask a question that wasn't on the list. That I do share questions ahead of time with our panelists so that I don't catch them off guard and they can prepare their answers. So that just gave me the thought of parents too. How well prepared are parents for something like this? And you did mention, that some of them didn't have a computer at home and all of that. So Kimberly, as somebody who works with parents, Indigenous parents within the Amphitheater School District, what did you find when this happened, when distance learning was employed? And I know you, through our discussion earlier, that you do have a hybrid model going at Amphitheater, but the kids would have to have had at some point, or still do have to have that internet connectivity and the equipment at home in order to log in. So did the school district provide any kind of training for parents if they didn't have that kind of experience to get their kids on a Zoom call or whatever it might have been?
For our district within Amphitheater here in Tucson, the district does have a resource page specifically for parents about how to use the Zoom or the WebEx or whatever platform that their Google Classrooms even, just these different types of virtual platforms that are being utilized to help our students in their work. So a lot of those resources are available on the district website, specifically for COVID-19 resources for parents. So that is being provided for a lot of the parents within our district. Specifically for our Native parents, it has been a struggle, as mentioned here and previously discussed, that a lot of our parents may not have had that understanding or training on how to use a virtual platforms such as Zoom or WebEx or Teams, Microsoft Teams. So it's been a training for them also, but it can also be a struggle for them, on having to understand how to utilize these platforms in order to help their children to do their work. And so it's a whole, threw us into a whole different realm of virtual understanding that really may or may not have been there before. So a lot of our parents have struggled with trying to learn these platforms, learn how to utilize all the different techniques that are needed in order for their students to gain access to their homework and to gain access to these virtual realms. So yeah, it's been hard, but those resources are available to our parents, and we try and keep our resources updated even for our own district website with our Native American program for our families, so that if there's any questions, they are always welcome to reach out to us. And so far we haven't had too many, but we do have quite a few families that are still struggling with even trying to get internet. So.
Well, and being in an urban area, people may assume that, well, everybody's connected. Everybody's got what, what they need, knows how to use the internet and all that. But as you just pointed out, that's not always the case, because there's still parents who don't necessarily have the means to get connected, pay their bill every month, or have computers at home. So thank you for pointing that out, that is still a need. But it also occurred to me that this is a great opportunity, and maybe that you're seeing that happen within your districts, for parents and educators to work together, because you're kind of in the same boat. Like it or not, everybody's dealing with COVID, and of course everybody's dealing with the humanity of COVID, the side of COVID that affects everybody, and that's the illness and the death that comes with COVID. Has come for over 500,000 people now in the United States. And so that brings me to trauma. And historical trauma is something that Native students and Native people have had to deal with over the centuries. Historical trauma is colonization, it's relocation, it's boarding schools, it's broken treaties, it's massacres. I mean, it's all kinds of things that have impacted Indigenous people in this country, like I said, over the centuries. But COVID is a new trauma. It's a current trauma. It's something that's happening now and today. And I'm sure many, if not all of your students have been impacted by this. And I'm sure some of your teachers as well have lost loved ones. So what kind of programs are there, or do you have to help children deal with the impacts of COVID-19, adding to the trauma that they already experience? Robbie, do you want to address that?
Well, there definitely has been trauma throughout this pandemic, and there already is the adverse childhood experiences that many of our students in a 100% free and reduced environment. All of our kids we're a CEP school, so all of our students are able to eat free and reduced lunch, actually free lunch. And so many of our kids come from split families and so forth. And that has been a challenge in itself. And now we're coupling that with them being in the home environment more often, them getting challenged by their parents to, we're calling the parents or we're calling the kids and saying, hey, you didn't turn in your work. And so there's that divide there. That the school definitely houses the social and emotional benefits for kids. And we've found that we've received emails from students that say, can't do this anymore. I'm taking care of my brothers and sisters at home. Plus I'm trying to juggle the chores that I have at home. Plus I'm trying to do my schoolwork. And so we've connected with kids through what we call success coaches. And so every student had a success coach, and their jobs as a success coach. And this was aides, this was principals, these were teachers that were reaching out to a group of students and just making sure that everything is okay. And of course, we've had our counseling programs very, very robust in being able to reach out to our students as well. But it's hard. That's been one of the most difficult parts of this, is that we're not seeing the kids every day. We're not being able to have conversation with the kids every day. We're there as a support system, but we don't necessarily have. That's why we're pushing really hard to be able to get the kids back on campus. At least some, even one day a week, will help us to make a personal connection with the kids. And we have a philosophy in our district of called the PASS system: personal, academic, social, and success. And so really we're struggling with all four of those elements right now, because we know kids are struggling, but we're not able to see them face to face, and we're not able to help to remedy some of those struggles that we would normally do with our socialization groups and our mentoring programs that we have a very strong mentoring program throughout our district. And that's probably been the most challenging aspect of all of this, is just being able to help kids to overcome by being there for them. We're not able to be there for them, which we prevent tragedies every day because of just being able to be there with our kids. And so just a personal connection, reaching out and communicating with them as much as possible. That's been kind of our strategy. And I think overall it's worked well, but I'm afraid that as we transition kids back, we're also going to have an overload of emotional and social issues that they have been building up inside. And now when they come amongst their peers, when they come amongst their teachers, there's going to be an overload of things that we're going to need to deal with as a school system. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to focus on heading into next year, and using some of our federal dollars, is how can we provide some support systems, and that's going to be important heading into next year.
Okay, so that addresses a question that one of our listeners has asked. Do any of the presenters have social emotional learning programs that students and parents can access? If so, what are some of them? So Dr. Clary, Cynthia, do you want to share that response?
Yes, thank you. We have been able to, in Salt River, we actually started on becoming a trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive school system. We're in year 3. And so it started with the opportunity of a group of 17 staff members to go to training in Washington, D.C. at the national level, and then some others regionally. So we have trauma-informed training for everyone that works in our school division, not just teachers. And so the next step of that, when we get back into in-person learning, is the parent component. But I think it's really important to share that being trauma informed, and we talk about trauma, we learned about trauma when we were at the conference, but trauma in Indigenous communities is different. I know that a lot of people try to paint the big, broad, sweeping scope of poverty or something like that, but intergenerational trauma is different than other subpopulations around the country deal with. And so first was acknowledging that. We're very fortunate that we have a really diverse staff. We do have community members that are employees and also other Indigenous staff members. And so making sure that we're getting perspectives from people that are members of different nations was been very, very important to us. Everyone undergoes the same training. We're really excited to be able to start offering that when we get back to both our board and our council, because we want to make sure everyone is coming from the right place. And when I say the right place, I mean, how does the reaction to trauma impact how a student performs at school? How does it impact he or she responds to a direction from a teacher? And so it's been very, very enlightening for our staff to go through this process. And we're really excited about how we're going to move forward with our students. It's when we do get back, whenever that is, that's going to be our approach. Our approach is, we've been out of school for almost a year already. Math is important, reading is important, all of that stuff is important. However, the first thing that I know that I need to do in my role is to make sure that my staff is okay. Mm-hmm. And so when we come back, we want to have a couple of weeks before kids come back, that we have the opportunity to get with staff, and then also have a series of parent meetings to talk about the transition back, like Robbie mentioned, is going to be tough for kids. And so it's also going to be tough on staff. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be our approach. We have a 5-year plan. And like I said, we're in year 3, but we kind of got derailed because of COVID. So we're very excited about where this work is going to take us. But it's very important for everyone to remember that one size doesn't fit all. We've talked about the Navajo Nation, and I have a lot of staff members that are from the Navajo Nation. I've got a staff member at one of my campuses. She's lost 8 family members. Mm-hmm. And so the sense of loss and is so overwhelming. We know that we need to address that first. I know kids, I said earlier when we were talking before this started, that teachers are really excited and really are ready to come back because they miss the children. But teachers need to be ready to teach. And I need to make sure, we all need to make sure that the mental health is not viewed as something that's taboo and we're not supposed to talk about, but we need to make sure everyone is mentally healthy before we welcome kids back into the campus, because I need 100% from everybody when our kids are back, because they're going to need our support as well.
Yeah, so but it's very important, like you said, to help your teachers be ready for that. And because they're going to be emotional themselves now, being back at school, reconnecting in person with their students, and then seeing in their students the effects of that trauma and what's happening with them. And you probably saw this, or maybe some of you saw this on TV last night on Channel 15, or the night before. They were a study had been done about how students are reacting to the fact that, and their parents are reacting to the fact that when they used to get A's or B's, now they're actually failing some courses because of the challenges inherent in what's happening with the pandemic, and that they're having mental health issues because of that. So, Kimberly, what's happening at Amphitheater with regards to that, helping the kids cope with not just the Native students that you work with, or whose parents you work with, not just coping with the fact that they've had huge losses, but that now they're not doing as well in school either.
Mhm. Yeah, just listening to this conversation about, the trauma that's affecting our students. There is so much that we can discuss on this issue, about what type of trauma our students are affecting, because it not only affects our students, but it affects the families, all of the families, our parents, the siblings, the brothers, the sisters, aunts, uncles, of what our children are going through. And a lot of the trauma that is faced, that has already been discussed, fear is being one of them, fear of not knowing what's going to happen, or fear of anything, not only of life itself, but also about grades, about whether or not they're going to see their friends again. All these feelings and emotions come into play, not only with fear, but of isolation. As Native communities, we've always been drawn to each other, to where we like to visit, we like to see each other in person. And so being isolated and away from our communities, our families, and our friends, it brings that sense of isolation upon a lot of our students. And not only that, but the stress, just as mentioned, some siblings have to take care of their younger siblings because now they're at home, as mentioned, with the chores and things that they would normally do at home. Now it's in addition to, on top of doing all of that with their work. So that brings a lot of stress, at times a lot of frustration. And so a lot of our students and parents even are experiencing this. I don't know how many calls we get, from parents alone and guardians that say, I don't know how to handle this. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. I just feel overwhelmed and I just need some help. And so, what we do is we provide those resources, not only in the schools through our counselors or our social workers, but also outside resources, local tribal behavioral wellness resources. And, in our area, we give respect to the Tohono O'odham and the Pasquayaqui tribes, for their resources that are available to our students and our parents to help them cope with these issues that they are facing. I can only do so much because I'm not trained in how to say the right words, or to make them, to provide that resource for them. So we have to, outsource a lot of those things for our parents and communities, specifically because they're tribal members. As mentioned, there's a difference of the trauma of what our Indigenous students face compared to the rest of the students in schools. And so, having these tribal resources available to our parents and our students, I think makes a significant impact in how they can face the outlook of their future, especially with school and what they face. So,
Thank you. And there was a comment on Facebook. Thank you, Dr. Clary. Sounds promising and exciting for your district, which is true. And thank you, Kimberly, for sharing that. One of the things that came to mind when you were talking, when Cynthia was talking, was different tribes have different ceremonies, different ways to cope with trauma. And you cannot, unless you're in 100% a school that's 100% one tribe, it would be very difficult to navigate that for each child and to know what's proper to say or talk about or not talk, what you shouldn't talk about, or again, what resource do you go to help, a particular student. So that's another challenge. Robbie, what is the mix of tribal members as students in Holbrook Unified?
Well, we're pretty much 99% Native American or Navajo, but we serve 39 different chapters because we have our dormitory, and so we do serve some Apache, we do some Hopi, and then we have some other Laguna tribe and some of those that are coming from within the Navajo Nation. So it's obviously a challenge to make sure that we serve all Native Americans' needs and all students' needs. And so we've done everything that we can to try to kind of create an environment that's inclusive to all of our tribes and to be able to respect all of the various ceremonies and so forth. But I think our dormitory brings in the diversity for our Native American tribes, which is unique to a lot of districts in Arizona because not a lot of districts have a dormitory. So
That's true. So I know probably all three of you, your districts are required to do tribal consultation because you receive Title I funds and you receive a certain amount of funding from Johnson O'Malley or Title VI. Or you just have a high percentage of Native American enrollment. So have you been able to discuss with tribal representatives how to deal with the trauma, the mental health issues? Are you currently applying those before the students even come back to school in person? Anybody?
Well, as I mentioned, we've been virtual since March, but that's one of the on-site services that we're providing. We are providing on-site counseling for our kids. We're very fortunate that we have a school and community relations department. Salt River is very unique in a lot of ways, but Mesa Public Schools are technically our home schools. And so we have more of our community member children that attend school in Mesa Public Schools than actually attend within the boundaries of the reservation. So they're a separate school district, obviously, but our staff is responsible for working and monitoring the academic and social emotional wellness of those kids. And so it's been a very good partnership thus far. When we have any student that's either our child or that goes to one of the Mesa schools, we have a team that is ready to respond and provide services. We're still doing some home visits and lots of referrals. We're trying to be like I said earlier, math and reading and all that stuff is super important. We know that, we're educators, but right now our approach is trying to make sure that we're eliminating any other barriers that have been caused to prevent the child from being well. So if that means they need a desk at home, we gave out desks. If they needed a Wi-Fi, we provided Wi-Fi. So, we've been trying to really be responsive to eliminate any barriers to educational opportunities while also working really diligent with a wide variety of social services folks in the community in Mesa Public Schools and our own employees to really make sure that we're meeting the kids and the families where they are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, you happen to be on a tribal nation. You happen to, be connected that way, whereas Amphitheater and Holbrook are not. Holbrook borders is a border town for Navajo Nation, and Amphitheater is an urban school district. So, like I said, especially in Amphitheater, there's going to be more of a mix of the kind of students that you have or the tribes that you may have to consult with on anything, on any subject. But you did bring up closing gaps, providing to them what they may be missing. And so there's this huge digital divide that the rest of the world or the United States is becoming aware of, but that we've known about for forever among people on reservations, not having that connectivity or computers at home. And you have provided that to all of your students, which is wonderful. But is that happening in Holbrook? Were you able to? I know in an effort to mitigate the detrimental effects of COVID-19 on school districts, the federal government has provided CARES Act funding. So I'm assuming you all received CARES Act funds. If not, correct me if I'm wrong. But how have these funds been put to use? If you haven't already specifically talked about that in your schools, have you had any support from the state, for example, additional funding? And if so, how have they been used?
Yeah. I'll jump in there. That's a great question, Nadine, and I think it's public knowledge that needs to be expounded upon, because we did receive $733,000 in the first ESSER funds, and at that point, by the time we got everybody to a one-to-one, which was a necessity, and by the time we had a learning management system, and by the time we did our personal protective equipment and our sanitation and all of the safety issues that surround, those funds were gone, and we had already exceeded those funds. And the second round of ESSER 2 funds is much more substantial, which is going to help us with some of the ionizations in the classroom, and maybe hiring additional temporary staff, at least for the first couple of years, to address some of these social and emotional issues that we feel like we're going to have to make more of a one-to-one connection with. And so the second round is actually, and if there is a third round, that will even be better to be able to offset some of these costs. And we're still working on Wi-Fi spots. We're rolling out about 140 of them, and that's not even enough. We need many more than that. But connectivity is a challenge in rural Arizona, and it's especially a challenge on the Navajo Nation. And our district boundaries reside in very low areas of the Navajo Nation. So we're talking 3G coverage. So not everybody within their locale can even get a Wi-Fi spot. And so we've delivered jump drive lessons. So we put lessons on jump drives, and we give them every 2 weeks. We transfer them in and out. We do paper packets. We do meal delivery to 30 some locations throughout 1,500 square miles boundaries. We have our own team that just delivers food a couple times a week. And it's been an extremely challenging time to be able to provide opportunities, not only educationally, but also through food service and emotional support. And that's really where our ESSER funds have gone. And now we're ready for round 2 that actually is going to prepare us for, now that we have one-to-one, we need to make sure that we have the opportunity to reach into the homes. And that's really what we're investing in now, which I think can be a blessing for us. There's many good things that will come from this disruption to education. And one of them is that we're able to get into the homes. We've had discussions time after time after time for multiple years. This is my 19th year in the Holbrook School District, and I don't know how many times it's come up with, how do we do math tutorial for a kid that lives in Greasewood, Arizona, out on the Navajo Nation, that's 45 miles from Holbrook, and how do we make that connection? Well, if they have Wi-Fi, we can make that connection at 7 o'clock at night with a teacher that can do tutorial, because we can do it just like we're doing this right here. And that's one of the positives that's come from this disruption, which we were probably ripe for disruption in education. We were probably in a good situation to maybe turn things upside down. We didn't need the pandemic to do that, but as a result, that is what has occurred. And that's a positive that will come from the investment that we're using these federal funds for, that I think we're going to be a much better education system after this all concludes.
Yeah, well, that was my next question. So thank you. I'm looking for any silver linings, in COVID, because there are a lot of things that, can be turned around for good, or will elicit positive responses, or, when there's something negative going on. I do want to ask this other question that we got through our chat room before we move on. What efforts, if any, for Indigenous students referred to and attending blind or deaf schools off-res, respective to the topic? So I'm not quite sure. Well, the topic is COVID-19. So if you've done any referrals for blind or deaf students off reservation in response to COVID, I guess is what we're looking for here. Did any of you have a comment on that or a response?
We haven't had any in Salt River. We haven't had any referrals come in. Like I said earlier, we are continuing to do any kind of referrals and on-site testing that we need to do. And so that's something that we're completely open to doing. In addition to our students that go to Mesa Public Schools, we have kids in boarding schools across the country and in most of the surrounding school districts in the greater Phoenix area. And so we do a lot of tribal consultations. But that's something that we haven't dealt with recently in Salt River.
So in the Holbrook School District, our exceptional services have been just that, exceptional. We really didn't stop providing services from March till May of last year. There was a gap there that we were still trying to figure things out, so to speak. But we were constantly using our paraprofessionals and our teachers to constantly reach out to our students with special needs to be able to make sure that they receive the services necessary. And then really from August all the way through, we've tried to provide on-site services for our students with disability. And that has been a continuous, we've done that in small group, we've done that in a safe environment. We have what is called a 12-point plan that allows for, the various degrees to make things safe, healthy, and educational. And so our special education services have been phenomenal. And our teachers have stepped up, our paraprofessionals have stepped up, our parents have worked to get their students into those environments in a safe way. And we've been able to continue that because it's been small group, it's been one-on-one. And so with our deaf and blind students, that has been a continuous service. And we haven't identified any new, but we've continued services that I'm aware of, at least, but we've been able to continue services for those students.
That's great. I hope that answered the question that was being asked. And I have no doubt that you are all doing what you can to help your students, and anything and everything that you can. So as I started to talk about before, looking for silver linings. In general, you can talk about before, during, and what you see for after the pandemic is over. Where are the signs of hope for Indian education in Arizona? So in other words, what good and exciting things are happening in your schools, or what do you expect to be happening in the future? Kimberly, you want to address that from a perspective of parents and Indian Education Committee, or your own personal perspective?
Sure. Yeah, there's just as mentioned, previously, that we are going to be better equipped as educators and know how to address for sure technological issues, for one, but it also gives us a chance to connect with our community and our parents on a one-on-one basis. Just as mentioned, with the different services that have been provided, those have not stopped. Those have continued, even with our school district. Those services have been continuing, and even more so of finding more resources that are available to our families and our students to help them get through this pandemic. So the silver lining on that is, providing more resources for our parents to help them cope and deal with these issues that our students are now facing. And, the hope for Indian education, we have outstanding students, that we service and that are a part of our community. And this even more so acknowledges them, and I always say that, even though that there is so much against our Native students already, with the falling behind and the failing grades and being at the bottom of, all these different types of reports, our students have that strength within them that they are surviving through this pandemic. So encouraging them and letting them know that, they are survivors, they are warriors, they have the strength to get through all these times, even all of these challenges and emotions that they are facing. They are still facing it head on, that they are pushing through and moving forward. And at the same time, learning and gaining that education and that knowledge, and even more so being at home with their families, to gain more of that traditional knowledge and to help broaden their minds and to help them seek, their pathway and their journey for education. So when we talk about silver linings, that brings our families closer together, and that we're able to share these type of traditions and values with our loved ones, and even more on how we face these challenges together as a family, whether that's your immediate family or your school family or your community. You know, we're facing it together, and that's the important concept through this whole thing.
Yes. And of course, again, back to historical traumas, one of the traumas that our ancestors had to deal with were things like smallpox and other diseases that came to this country, this land before, that weren't here before European contact and colonization and all of that. So, you can always point to our history to students, to Indigenous students too, and say, yes, a lot of people died, but we're still here, we're still around. There was a lot of strength that brought us through that, and resiliency. And for me, I personally want to help Native students go beyond surviving and into thriving, and to being, productive people at school and in the community, and in whatever they do, to feel good about themselves and have a good, strong sense of self-worth and identity. And so that's some of the work that I do through my nonprofit, which is Sienna, the Southwestern Institute for the Education of Native Americans. I'm the founder and CEO of that. So we've looked at what we do is we show students about their leadership capabilities and give them models and role models of Native people who have achieved a lot. Because yes, we always share the negative. We always see the the data, and I mentioned already, as a subgroup, Native Americans are usually in the bottom in math and reading and language arts. But what people don't typically share is all the positives, all the achievements that we've had. And so that has to be balanced with that, to show. We have a Native American astronaut. We've got a Native American doctors and lawyers and legislators. I mean, Deb Holland from Laguna Pueblo, of course, is my tribe, so I'm very proud of her. It has been nominated for the Secretary of the Interior by Biden. Hopefully, she will be confirmed. But there are a lot of positives to point to. So and positive role models and people that can achieve, Native people that can achieve at high levels. And so we just need to expose our children to more and more of that, so they can feel like, oh, I can do it too, because this person also overcame some of the same things that I'm dealing with now. So how do you address those kinds of things, Robbie or Cynthia, in your school districts? Robbie?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nadine, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to celebrate that Aaron Yazzie helped with the Mars mission. He's a graduate from Holbrook, and he actually came back and spoke with us just a few years ago. His mother teaches, Shirley Yazzie teaches at our high school, and he was one of the instrumental players. He went to Stanford, now he works for NASA, and he was instrumental in us being on Mars right now. It's amazing. And I think when you celebrate those kind of things, we try to, as much as possible, to bring those people, our kids back, and let them speak to our staff. And like, we had the USO Marine of the Year, and we brought him back, and the story that he came from and where he's at now was an amazing story. And so our teachers need to hear about the success stories of our students that have gone through all those historical trauma things that you've mentioned to become better. I mean, they've made themselves better people, and they've come out of those situations as a new person, and really leading the nation in many ways. And so we've brought back lawyers, we brought back doctors, we brought back, and that's how we celebrate. And we celebrate with a common theme of, when one Roadrunner succeeds, we all succeed. And so we celebrate that whenever we hear good things. We celebrate that throughout our school community, and displaying that pride amongst our Navajo Nation. Just today, we meet weekly with the Navajo Nation, and President Nez brought up Aaron Yazzie as an example. And just those little nuggets of inspiration can inspire other kids to lead as well. And one of our goals in the Holbrook School District is to have the president of the Navajo Nation come from Holbrook High School. That's an aspiration that we have, and we talk about that. We really do. We talk about it. We promote it, and I think that we will achieve it at some point. So celebrations are very important.
Yes, they are. Cynthia, do you have anything you want to share?
Oh, I think everything that's been mentioned is wonderful, and we do those things as well. But one of the things that we have learned on our path to become trauma informed and trauma sensitive is that we have to be very careful sometimes with our younger students not to frame success, using that word, through a colonizer's lens,
Yeah.
and really looking to see what success means to the student, to his or her family, and to the community. Because we have most of our students are successful. Even if they struggle academically, they're providing the babysitting to their younger siblings. That's a success. That is a family and community dynamic that we honor, and we need to continue to honor that and make sure that kids understand that there are lots of different ways for them to be successful contributors to their community for the betterment of their whole community. And sometimes school's part of it, sometimes it's not. We have a young man, and I have to tell the story that I was talking to his grandma, and everybody at school was really excited, that he was going to be the first kid in the family to go off to college. And he got there, and it really wasn't for him. And so one of my staff members was talking to the grandma, and I was standing there and said, we really had such high hopes for him. And I said, well, wait a minute. And the grandma looked at me and she said, thank you for stopping, because I don't know what I was going to say. She was really so upset, because he was completely successful. College wasn't where he needed to be, but he was home, taking care of his family, working a great job, contributing to support elders in his family. And that's important to acknowledge as well.
For sure. Yeah. And not every student, like you said, is either cut out for college or whatever they want to do with their lives. In terms of supporting themselves and their families, doesn't necessarily require going to college. And if you don't go for whatever the reason is, it doesn't make you a failure. It just means you chose the path that was right for you. So thank you very much for pointing that out. And that's very important. And I love hearing the success stories as well as, the challenges. So you have to know what the challenges are in order to develop programs or services, or responses to those challenges. And then that meeting those challenges is how these people go on to become successful at whatever it is they do. But I really like that you started that with, you have to define success for yourself. It's not necessarily what the broader society says, or those in control say what success is. It's not necessarily about being a millionaire or a billionaire these days. They seem to be all over the place, billionaires. It used to be millionaire was the target. But it's maybe it's living just a healthy life where you have everything you need, you're healthy, you can be happy in that and do the kinds of things that you like to do for pleasure, while still, be able to meet all your obligations, and hey, that sounds pretty good to me right now. All those kinds of things that we can enjoy. Money isn't the answer to everything. There's a lot of very unhappy, wealthy people, I believe, in this world. So we only have a couple of minutes left. Is there anything else anybody would like to share, or maybe get another question before we're done? Don't see any in the chat box, but so if there's anything else you'd like to say, feel free to chime in.
Nadine, this is Robbie. I just want to say thank you for opening this conversation up. I think it's a needed conversation. I think it's you've got great people here that understand what is needed in our Native American communities. And, one of the things to piggyback on the success, we started talking about generational success. And really, that's all we want, whatever that looks like. I hope that the generation that we are following, we're doing better than them in some way, whether that's financial or whether that's educational, or whether we're able to just take care of our family members in a better way, health-wise, generationally. So that concept of generational success, and that's what we should be focused for in education, is how can we make the children that we have now, how can we make them be better providers for their families, for their moms, their dads, their grandmas, their grandpas, and make them proud of the accomplishments that they've come through the education system. And I think we're doing that, to be honest with you. If you really look at it in that framework, we're doing a really good job. And that should be our mission. That should be our vision for servicing all kids, but especially for our Native American kids.
Yes, I totally agree. And I'm actually part of a coalition now called Reimagining Education, a call for all voices to engage. And one of the main voices that we're looking for, we want all voices, of course, all stakeholders, but one of them is the student voice. We're looking for the student to speak up and actually kind of guide their own education. You know, what do they need? What are they looking for? What do they want to, what are they aspiring to? And then what kind of help can be provided through, through their regular K-12 education in order to get there. So this is so exciting. And of course we could talk more and more, but our time is up. So I will, that will be the last word. I'm the host, so I get the last word. No, I'm kidding. So, but thank you all so very much. I'd love hearing from you and hearing your wisdom, and I just thank you so much for what you do for your Indigenous students and families, and just wish you easier times ahead. And we'll love to talk to you again, hopefully sooner rather than later, and hopefully in person. So have a good evening, everybody, and thank you again for being here.
Bye.
Bye-bye.